Good afternoon and welcome to the webinar, Increasing Project Design and Delivery Efficiency with Reusable Component Libraries. This event is brought to you by Engineering News Record and sponsored by Bentley Systems. Hi, I'm Adam Palant, Manager Moderator for today's webinar. Thank you for joining us. First, I'd like to welcome Claire Rutkowski, Senior Vice President and Chief Information Officer at Bentley Systems. During her more than 20-year career in the AEC industry, Claire has received numerous awards, most recently the Top 80 CIOs You Should Know in 2020 and the Top 10 Most Inspiring Women Leaders in 2022. Claire uses her experience to advocate for chief experience officers at engineering firms and serve as a bridge between Bentley and its engineering accounts. Joining Claire, we'll also hear from Danielle Manning, Product Manager for ProjectWise Component Center at Bentley Systems. During her 15-year career at Bentley Systems, Danielle has served in various roles, training users, supporting customer success, and guiding product development. Currently, Danielle leads technical development and project implementations for ProjectWise's Component Center capabilities. Joining Claire and Danielle, we are excited to welcome Phil Bates, Principal Consultant and Senior Associate within Mott MacDonald's Strategic Advisory Team. He has spent much of his career providing strategic advice to asset owners on digital transformation, asset management, and the adoption of modern methods of construction. Today, Phil will discuss his recent work with UK's Environment Agency, including the creation and deployment of their Smart Object Library. I'll rejoin the presenters at the end to answer your questions that come in throughout the webinar, so don't forget to submit them in your Q&A section of the webinar console. And now I'll hand things over to Claire Rutkowski from Bentley Systems to kick off today's discussion. Over to you, Claire.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. In today's webinar, we're going to discuss and explore the challenges facing AEC firms and asset owners. We're going to talk about how component libraries and component reuse can help address and alleviate those challenges, and we'll go through the strategies and best practices for adopting and implementing component libraries. Importantly, we're going to provide several real-world projects where component libraries and reuse are improving design efficiencies and deliverable quality. The real-world examples are always my favorite. Before we get to that, let's talk about some of the top challenges that are facing the engineering service firms of today. The first one is really workforce related. We have talent shortages, and you don't need me to tell you that. The silver tsunami, or the wave of retirement that we're all facing from our aging workforces, is reducing the amount of talent that we have on staff. We have shrinking engineering cohorts entering the workforce from university, and we have competition from other industries such as tech. Add to that declining diversity rates, and we have a problem. We couple that with a greater demand for infrastructure projects and more sustainability requirements. Developed nations have maintenance, repair, and enhancement infrastructure projects that urgently need to be taken care of. And developing nations have net new infrastructure projects that are of very high demand due to population growth, urbanization, and population migration patterns. Between the talent shortages and the greater demand, whatever the cause, it's creating a historic backlog for AEC firms. Anecdotally, we're hearing about firms that are turning down or not bidding on projects. Here in the United States, the average backlog is about 15 months. So all of these challenges are shifting how firms think about and how they execute and operate in the short and long terms, accelerating digital transformation. For me, every problem is an opportunity, so it's an exciting time. Phil, what about you? What are some of the asset owner challenges that you've experienced working with Mott MacDonald?
Thanks, Claire. Yeah, I think asset owners are facing similar challenges to AEC firms, but they're feeling those impacts at a much broader level across their delivery partners that they work with. For me, I think the particular challenges in the context of this session for asset owners include increasing productivity and reducing costs of project delivery, so being able to do more with less, being able to iterate designs and test the best options with suppliers to achieve their outcomes, whether that's net zero carbon, hazard removal, or operational efficiency. But they want to do that without increasing massively the upfront cost of design through lots of design iterations. And then I think another major area is compliance with asset data standards, and getting their suppliers to do this, where they're reliant on that data to drive business decisions. And so they need to receive quality asset information from their suppliers consistently, which is a big challenge. And obviously, while we're here today, one approach to addressing that and overcoming some of these challenges is the use of component libraries and component reuse.
That's right. A component management solution is typically a centralized library that provides designers with a comprehensive source of organizational and project components while maintaining the metadata and file-based information associated with the components. Using a component management solution, designers can quickly find the right components for their design, reducing the time and effort needed to search for components.
That's right, Claire. Bentley's ProjectWise Component Center is an example of a cloud-based digital component management solution. The solution directly integrates with Bentley Connect Edition and third-party design applications. By having a centralized library, organizations can drive standardization and component reuse. So component reuse is the practice of reusing components from previous designs in new designs. This approach saves designers time and effort by leveraging existing components, reducing the design cycle cost. Component reuse also helps maintain consistency and quality across designs, as designers can easily use proven components. Our accounts and many other infrastructure firms have shared with us they are seeing reduced rework, increased cost savings, improved sustainability and scalability, and better quality of design projects using a digital component management solution.
Yeah, that's correct, Daniel. I think we're certainly seeing those benefits at Mott MacDonald, and I'm sure many other AEC firms are. I think for AEC firms, let's be realistic that if you've been delivering BIM projects for a little while, then most teams probably already have some common content that they use on each and every project, either saved on network drives or shared areas. I think the real benefits come when this is systematically managed and shared across teams and geographies within your business to increase efficiency and avoid cost of recreating content on each and every project. At Mott MacDonald, we manage this in our business practice areas, which are water, transport, energy, and the built environment. Our technical practice leads control the content in the library, sharing best practice components with our practice networks for the benefit of a wide audience. If we take the water sector as an example, we serve many UK water clients who broadly have the same asset types. And so we try our best to standardize the components we use across the project teams that deliver those projects, but make the content parametrically flexible to fit as many site locations as possible. For asset owners, we've also recently seen that they're starting to take the lead on this and developing their own component libraries to realize these benefits across a wider set of delivery teams and supply chains. And I'll touch on this more with the Environment Agency example shortly. On the last point, at Mott MacDonald, we've developed our own digital platform called Moata, which you can think of as an app store or a marketplace of solutions specifically designed for infrastructure professionals. These applications are built either through our own in-house software engineering teams or leverage third-party technologies within our platform. One of those solutions is Moata Intelligent Content, which leverages ProjectWise Component Center as the base technology. On top of that, we have a dedicated library management team who create and curate our clients' content, helping them structure and manage the library to meet end user needs. Library management is often an overlooked but a key component of successful adoption of component libraries. On top of that as well, we use analytics and dashboards to report and track object use and component use and the value that is being delivered. And we have a specialist content creation team who develop the parametric components and assemblies that we use in a variety of software applications across our business and also our clients' teams, translating 2D design details and standard designs into these parametric assemblies that enable reuse in a variety of project situations. So the first project example I'm going to touch on today is our work with the UK Environment Agency. They're one of our asset owner customers who have started to develop their own object library solution. The Environment Agency are responsible for delivering and managing flood and coastal assets across the UK. Well, England and Wales, I should say. Scotland do their own thing. And in the last couple of years, we've helped them set up their smart object library powered by Murata Intelligent Content. We work closely with the EA's digital and data program to develop a suite of objects aligned to their standard asset breakdown structure. Our content creation team embedded parametric capability in the objects that enables end users to adjust key dimensions and properties of those objects, such as flow rate for pumps or slopes of embankments, that are constrained within certain limits that are in accordance with the EA's engineering standards. We now host the Smart Object Library on their behalf and provide access to the EA's entire supply chain to use the objects for early design development. The EA had objectives to create standardized content that enabled rapid prototyping of designs, as well as drive consistency in the quality of the data they receive from the design partners. To go with the content, we create how-to videos and user guides that give instructions to delivery partners on how to maximize the use of the content. And to date, we've developed over 70 objects out of the EA's 150 asset types, onboarded 10 of their delivery partners, and saved over 500 hours in recreation of the content. But I think we've seen that the benefits and the value of component libraries aren't always fully realized.
That's right, Phil. Sometimes there is a lack of realized value. I've seen some organizations and users unaware of the existence or availability of a digital component library, or they have yet to receive training. In addition, if a digital component library has a limited variety of components that users need for their specific projects, they may not find it useful or may choose to create their own components instead. Furthermore, if the digital component library is not compatible with the design applications that users are already using, they may be unable to integrate it with their workflows easily.
So picking up on the quality concerns and issues. So I think if the components in the library are poor quality or are not up to the user's needs and standards, they often choose to create their own components, potentially offline of the library. In some cases, digital component libraries and the direct design integrations may come at a cost, which may not be feasible for some businesses. And I think some users may require additional customization within their objects to meet their specific needs, which some of the pre-existing content doesn't have in the library. And so those drive some behaviors to create their own content. I think in addition to these challenges, we've occasionally seen organizations make a few other mistakes and missteps along the way.
That's right, Phil. We have seen instances where a lack of defined processes and workflows results in a risk of inconsistent component quality, leading to errors and inaccuracies in the library. This can result in design issues, project delays, and increased cost. Also, one of the other common mistakes is that components in the library need to be organized logically. Poor organization and naming conventions can make it difficult to locate components, leading to wasted time and effort. Having a clear naming convention makes it easier to find and use the components.
And another one from me is connecting the content development into your engineering and design team's needs. Often thinking the library is just for BIM technicians and modelers to be more efficient, rather than being specific to the engineering design that you've got to do. I think also looking at the technology you're using and sometimes not using the technology that's appropriate for the needs that you've got. So we've seen people try and do library management on network drives and SharePoint and other tools that aren't specifically built for the job, with the application plugins and search functionality that you need to make it easy for people to adopt.
Yeah, I think that what both Phil and Danielle, what you're both talking about here is the pitfall of not having the right business processes in place to support the use of the components. So one of the things that I see is companies not thinking through the whole process. So everybody does end up still doing their own thing or sticking their own thing in SharePoint or on OneDrive or wherever, right? And not being able to find things. So I think it's important to think of the component library kind of like a real library. Somebody has to select the books. Someone has to confirm that those are good books for the library to have, and then present the books. And then when people come to your library, they have to know where it is and how to navigate the choices. So the component library is kind of the same thing. Designers have to know how to flag components as potentially good components for use on other projects. And then someone needs to approve them or not and say, maybe not. And they need to get cataloged appropriately, right? And then if we do want to make them into parametric components, they need to be designed that way and altered. And then importantly, people need to understand how to navigate that library and incorporate the components into their own designs. And the best way to do that in terms of getting the right business process thought through and then implemented with standardization and naming conventions and everybody using it consistently is through change enablement. So I always think about the golden triangle, they call it. Some people call it a three-legged stool, but it's people, process, and technology. So technology, the component library, the component management system is one thing, but without people and process, the whole thing just kind of falls apart. So it's important to think about what change enablement process you're going to use. Now, some people follow Cotter. That's 8 steps of change enablement. Some people follow a change enablement practice from a group called ProSci, PROSCI, if you want to look it up. But they all amount to the same thing. The first thing is creating the awareness. Something's changing, right? We're going to be doing things a new way, not the OneDrive, SharePoint, everything on your desktop way, but the standardized component management center way. And then creating the desire. And that is done by figuring out ahead of time what is in it for the people who are actually going to be working on those components. It's really easy to think of how it benefits our accounts, our customers, because of consistency and quality and safety and all those types of things. But what's in it for the individual engineer is sometimes hard to articulate. So it's important that we think that through ahead of time. And then, Phil, as you said, providing the right training, whether it's videos or handouts, those things are all really important too. And I love the way you talked about being able to measure how often a component is used and who's pulling them, because that provides that reinforcement to reach out and say, hey, great job. I saw that you used, 5 components this month that saved 40 hours of work. Or, I don't think you're using the component library. Maybe you should. So I think those are all really good change enablement practices to put in place, because inadequate change enablement will make any technology implementation fall on its face. So we've talked about all of the challenges and pitfalls, and we've talked a little bit about best practices you could employ. Danielle, I'd like to pass it back to you to maybe talk about a few more best practices.
Sure, thanks, Claire. Some of the best practices I've seen used by organizations is the designation of an administrator for the digital component library that can ensure the library is fully managed. The administrator can facilitate consistency, organization, and maintenance. Also, they can provide training and support to help increase adoption and verify all their users are aware of the benefits and the features. In the same way as having a dedicated administrator to manage a component library, a component organizational structure is also key to a successful library. For example, you could classify the content by discipline, by supplier, or even by project. Well-categorized content helps users filter or search for components more efficiently and helps to build user confidence in the library and its content. Another important area is to develop and centralize components based on the agreed organizational structure. Developing and creating components in-house allows you to drive standardization while maintaining quality. A centralized component library benefits organizations with these cross-discipline teams in geolocated offices by providing a single access point for all.
And of course, having those business processes to support that library is important. I've already touched on that, but really, when you're thinking about your content management system, think about who are going to be the admins and the managers. Are we going to organize by practice? Are we going to organize by type of component, or maybe type of component within a practice? And really think through the following questions. Who gets to identify a component? Can anyone identify a component? Does it need to be approved before it gets put in the library? Who decides if it's going to be parametric or not? Who does that work? All of that kind of thing that Phil talked about that he did for a successful implementation at Mott are things that you really need to think about in order to make sure that the processes are in place, not only to launch the content, but also to make sure that it stays current. Phil, you want to talk a little bit about the onboarding and training? Because I think you guys had some really good practices around that.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's obviously a really important part of any technology adoption and onboarding. Is giving the users the ability to maximize the use of the platform. We've deployed platform training as well as user guidance for the objects. We do it at both the technology level and also the object level, which includes sort of how-to videos and user guides. And I think, as you were saying, Claire, the reporting dashboards are a great way to track adoption. And then from there, we can target either awareness raising campaigns or additional training for those users that aren't yet bought in to what you're trying to do. And that kind of links into the continual improvement bit as well, where we try to leverage user feedback as much as possible. So we have built-in forms within our Murata support site and a user community in there. And they're able to highlight issues or suggest improvements to either the platform functionality or the object functionality. And this gets funneled into a backlog that we then work with our user community to resolve quite quickly. So setting those kind of things up, I've found are really useful. I think we'll jump on to our final example. So earlier I talked about an example that was tailored around asset owner libraries and the example with the Environment Agency. This second one is an example that shows the use of component libraries specifically within a major infrastructure project. So there's kind of three levels that we've talked about. There's within your own businesses, within asset owners, and now this example around major infrastructure projects. High Speed 2 is, as I'm sure some of you, or probably most of you have heard, is delivering a new high-speed rail connection from London to the north of England. I think it's our largest infrastructure project in the UK at the moment, with many organisations helping to deliver it. That drove the need to think about standardisation of repeatable design elements, such as bridges and MEP equipment, which, due to the number and variation needed across the scheme, meant that we tried to centrally manage it, creating those components once and then using them many times across the design and the design models. And we've got thousands of models as part of this project. Murata Intelligent Content hosted the objects, the standardized objects for the delivery team, and made it accessible across the whole design joint venture. And as the design developed, we utilized the reporting tools that we've got and also queried the models that were developed to verify and ensure that teams were using the latest content from the library. And where issues were identified, we could pass this to engineers to resolve before the models got issued to the client. And they could replace those components and any outdated design information. By standardizing the modeling methods and providing a centrally managed location, the arduous activities such as drawing production downstream became much more efficient because everyone was using the same content. So to wrap up, here are some of the benefits we've seen at McDonald, and I'm sure if others follow this path, we'll be able to achieve as well.
Those are all really great benefits there, Phil. And we've seen these with other clients as well. Improved productivity, right? Because you're reusing, and that reuse then enables you to shorten the lifespan of a project, which means that you can gain greater throughput. So that 15 months of backlog to get through, hopefully companies can get through it a little bit quicker. Similarly, reduced cost, right, which you can choose to retain and reinvest in other digital initiatives. Increased consistency and standardization, of course, helps with meeting regulations, as Phil talked about before, but it also helps with making sure that the quality is always consistent, which always ends up driving safety. Enhanced collaboration is another benefit that we hear lots of people talking about, because what ends up happening when you're talking about a component that's going to be used over and over again, designers tend to get together and make sure that it's really good, right? As well as portfolio intelligence. And Phil already talked about some of that in terms of being able to look at your portfolio of components and know which are being used more frequently, which is great. So all good stuff, lots of value there. Now with that, I'm going to transition back to Adam. We have time to answer some questions, and we're more than happy to answer as many as we can that you put into the chat. Adam, over to you.
Thank you all. Great information you share with us today. Now, before we have our presenters address your questions, I'd like to remind you that we'd love your feedback. So please take a few moments to complete our webinar survey, which you will see on your screen now. And you'll be directed to it at the end of the program. So let's get over to our first question. This one is for Danielle. How do I keep my component center up to date as requirements and standards change?
Sure, that's a great question. So I think keeping the component libraries current requires a proactive approach. So set a plan for reviewing your components regularly. You could do this every 6 months or perhaps every year to ensure those components in your library are always up to date. Second, I would probably give feedbacks from your users of your components to identify if there are any issues or areas for improvement. You could maintain version control for your components to ensure you can track those changes and manage updates. And then lastly, I would make sure that you test any changes to your components thoroughly before releasing them to confirm they worked as expected.
Excellent, excellent. This one is for Claire. My company isn't using a component library. How can we get started?
That's a great question. Well, the first thing to think about is start where you are. Think about those business process questions. Think about those questions that are, who is going to identify the components? Well, actually, let me back up a minute. Before you even do that, do you have an executive sponsor? Do you have someone who can drive change through the organization, particularly through the engineering and design organization in the case of AC firms? And as an asset owner, is there someone in the organization who can speak to the standards that you want, right? And who can change the behavior? If you don't have an executive sponsor, it's very difficult to change behavior. So you need to find that first. Once you have found an executive sponsor, then you get into figuring out, how do we answer those business process questions of who can identify a component? Are we going to require that it gets approval from somewhere or someone, right? How are we going to organize our components? Are we going to have an organization team that's dedicated to harvesting the components and cataloging them appropriately. You know, before I was with Bentley, I was with MWH, and we actually had a team, and that was their sole job, was to harvest. We called it harvesting. That's our word. Harvest the components, and then go ahead and catalog them and ensure they had the right approval. So you have to make all of those decisions first, and then move on to the actual identification of components, populating the component center, and then creating, or in parallel creating, but then executing your change enablement plan. So I would start with the executive sponsor, then get the group together to make business decisions around what is the process going to be, and then actually go ahead and implement the component document library, and then communicate and train and all of that good stuff.
Excellent. Thank you, Claire. Next question's coming in. This is for Phil. Hey, Phil, can you share any other real-world examples or projects where a component library and component reuse are being applied?
I think there's plenty of examples. I think our most recent work is in the UK water sector, where we've developed a number of object libraries for a few of our clients, like Severn Trent and Scottish Water, and we're working on a couple of others. I think water have gone a long way down the road of standardization of their designs and their assets. So I think in that sector particularly, we're seeing a lot of uptake. Probably transport is the other area, like I was talking about with HS2. There are other transport schemes, major transport schemes, where you've got lots of teams working together, potentially from different companies based in different locations. Having a centralized component management solution is really, really key to distribute that standardized content across those teams. Excellent.
Thank you. All right. So next question. What's the software that can be used to make these components? I just lost. I'm sorry. There you go. What's the software that can be used to make these components? SketchUp or Revit, for instance?
Hi, I can't speak for other content digital component library and their platform. However, specifically for ProjectWise Component Center, the service itself is file agnostic. So we'll support anything coming into the library, DGNs, RFAs, SketchUp files, and any type of format.
Excellent. I keep losing it. All right, so here's another one. CAD standards are the bottleneck for sharing components between projects. Is there any future consideration by Bentley to remove this bottleneck so components are shared across clients or agencies? Other software packages have 3D component features embedded in the software itself, so templates, components, features, and models can be shared across different owners. This is the only way I see sharing component becoming useful for the average infrastructure project.
I can start off and then perhaps Phil can sort of follow it up. So for the CAD standards, once again, can only speak for my service, but ProjectWise Component Center. However, what we allow for is you set up your component library in an organizational context. And then once you have your catalogs of components, we give you the ability to share them to ProjectWise projects. So that allows for the collaboration of you having your organizational components and then trickle them down to a project context to share them. And I'm not sure, Phil, if you want to comment on that one also.
Yeah, I think it is a challenge, definitely, when clients have different, ways that they want the objects represented on their drawings. I think we try and manage that by producing the objects generically for a variety of clients, and then having templates and tools that enable you to convert the objects into a variety of different forms for different clients. But it definitely is a challenge. I think the bit where we have focused is more on the data side rather than how it looks on a drawing. So the 3D object can be fairly generic, and then the attributes that you record against that 3D object and those properties, we can swap them in and out as needed, depending on the asset data requirements that client has. So I'm not sure if that's an issue you found, but that's certainly been beneficial for us. And yeah, we focus potentially less on how that's represented on a drawing.
Excellent. The next one, are there plans to implement component library in the iTwin platform? Anybody on that one?
Danielle, you want to take that?
Oh, sorry. Sure. That's a great question. There are plans on, we are looking into the functionality of some sort of integration with different tools and working with the iTwin platform team.
Great. All right, next one. We use cell libraries extensively. Are there any other tools Bentley has to create, maintain, and publish more complex component libraries?
I guess I can take that one too. So as once again, I can't speak for other software or other solutions. However, Component Center does support cell libraries. We do support them in the aspect of you can upload a cell library to Component Center, and you can also sort of extract all of the individual components from a cell library, and you can use them directly in Bentley design applications. So that is supported.
Excellent. All right, let's keep going. In deploying a component library within an organization, would you agree that adoption is one of the main areas that needs to be addressed to ensure deployment and usage success? And if so, are you able to share any tips on how you have overcome this with your clients?
Shall I chime in on that one? Yeah, so I think it is a massive challenge. We've certainly found that with the Environment Agency. I think we've had to do a lot of communication and training with their delivery hubs. So they operate in regional delivery hubs for their projects. And so we've had to do a lot of reach with them to just show them what's there, what we've got, how the objects work, how they're hopefully better than what they've got themselves within their own organizations. And make their lives a bit easier in designing those projects. So I'd say, yeah, communication, awareness raising, all of those things play a massive part. And then on the HS2 side, on the kind of project side, I think it's kind of almost mandated that those components are used within the design models as a kind of top level thing, because that filters right through into efficiency of drawing production and all those kind of things. So yeah, it depends, but certainly communication and awareness of it's there, it's a good thing to use, it has these benefits, and a mandated side in some circumstances on major programs.
Excellent. All right, the next one, and I apologize, I'm not sure exactly when these came in during our presentation, so they may relate to a certain slide or not, but one person's asking, could you recommend a successful naming convention for the components?
I can start with that, Phil. I'm not sure if you want to also chime in on this one. Really naming, I mean, the NBS naming format is a good one. It's starting to be used internationally. I find a lot of organizations just have their own standard naming convention, as we don't, in our portal, we don't enforce a naming convention on your components or on your catalogs. It's completely up to the organization to set the standards and how they want to organize their content.
Yeah, I think I can add to it. I think I'm fairly certain there's a British standard that we're following in our libraries. It may have gone up to an ISO international standard now. I haven't got the number off the top of my head, but I can definitely dig it out and share it around if you do want to follow a BS British standard or an ISO standard.
Excellent. Next one that came in said, And again, I apologize, not sure at which point this came in. Can you describe role of owner in this process?
So if that's referring to the environment agency example, so they are essentially looking to hold their own library, so that all of their supply chain use a common set of components in their designs. So their role working with us was to specify what assets they wanted to develop 3D objects for, and also work with us on the level of functionality they wanted those objects to have. So that ranges, there's a whole range, but some of them they wanted to be really sort of highly parametric, and they wanted to constrain the properties by which a user could change either the geometry or the shape and size of those objects as part of the design. So I think the pumps one I referenced, a user could input the flow rate that they required, and the size of the pump would update, the input and output pipe sizes would update, those kind of things. So we work quite closely with the EA and their engineers on the specification of the objects and what they needed to deliver to be part of the design process. The other side of it was they've got really well developed asset data standards within the EA. So they were really keen for us to get those embedded to the objects, which, as I mentioned, drives that consistency in what they get back from their suppliers. So if they use the objects in their design models, they fill out the properties and the asset data requirements that are in those objects. And then as the suppliers deliver their designs, they get consistency in what they get back.
Excellent. Next one. Can the component center be used for standard details like pavement markings, concrete joint details, etc.? Or is this more for structural architectural features like valves, pipes, etc.?
Thanks. Yes, it can, and yes, it should be. So it's just a basic function of the library. It's driving standards by making the standard details available for reuse. So that is for, you can use Component Center for the standard details or for some of the features such as valves and pipes, etc.
Wonderful, wonderful. Let's see, next one. I'm sorry, my computer keeps jumping here. But, are these components imported to softwares like SketchUp or Revit for further modeling work? Can it be?
I guess that's me once again. So they can be, but for specific applications, I think you mentioned SketchUp. We do not have a direct integration to SketchUp, but however, ProjectWise Component Center is file agnostic, so you can host all of those components in the platform, in the service for that. And then in addition, I had mentioned in the presentation, we have the direct design integration with Bentley Connect Edition softwares, MicroStation, OpenRoads, OpenRail, and then we also do have third-party integrations, which includes Revit. So you could store them in Component Center, place them, open them, load them in a Revit application, and I think you wanted to import them to do following more modeling work. So you can do that with our third-party design application integrations.
Wonderful. We're still good with time. So the next one up, and this is timely with infrastructure projects. Phil, your comments on sustainable smart object library and its effects on MMC?
Yeah, great question. So it's something we're working towards with the Environment Agency. So the objects we've created at the moment are for things like flood walls, which produces, I guess, a long linear stretch of flood wall. The modern methods of construction angle that we want to take that in is that as the EA develop, things like standard precast offsite units for flood walls that kind of connect together in a row, is that we embed that in the object functionality, so that we can cut that long linear flood wall into offsite standardized segments. And we want to do that for a whole range of other assets as well, hopefully in the future. I think I think the connection between MMC, modern methods of construction approaches, and object libraries is really key. So having the ability to translate offsite approaches into your digital model and replicate that in your digital model is super important. And then the sustainable bit is understanding the impact of that. So trying to measure whether they're lower carbon solutions or easier to construct, or better operationally, like all of those things you can test through the digital model once you've developed it. How to place the components, how to lift them, etc., is all comes into that, I think.
Beautiful.
Hopefully that makes sense.
I'm sure it does. Absolutely. Yeah. This one, it's been floating out there. I apologize. It took me a while to get to. And I think it was mentioned at some point during this presentation. Is MOADA an acronym for something?
It's not. It came from, so it's a Maori term, because Moata, the digital platform, was first developed in our New Zealand office. I'm not going to have a stab at what it stands for. It does stand for something, and I should know it, but I don't. So, but yeah, it's a Maori term.
We won't hold that against you, Phil.
Yeah, I can follow up if you're really interested.
Another question came in, should be easy. Where can we see general examples or visuals of components like those being discussed here?
So one option is to head over to our motmac.com/digital website. And if you follow the links to Moata Intelligent Content, we've got a bunch of videos that show some of the work that we've been doing. And there's some of the parametric objects that I've been talking about today. Danielle, Claire, have you got examples of as well? The MotMac
Danielle, we have videos on the use of Component Center on Bentley.com, correct?
Yes, that's correct. On Bentley.com, there's also a Bentley Communities wiki page that has a bunch of information about Component Center. We do have some branded libraries also. So we do have some collateral that you could see all of the information about it there.
Excellent. Thank you. Next question. How do you deal with the professional liability when reusing a component from the library?
Shall I take that? So I think, well, certainly with the Environment Agency and others, we've put statements within the library that when a user downloads that object, they're still taking the design liability. So they're still responsible for checking that the design works and functions properly. We take responsibility for a bit of the functionality. So if one of the parametric features isn't working or not doing what it's supposed to be doing, then we'll work with them to resolve that. But from a design liability perspective, that still sits with the end user of the component.
Excellent. I don't see any additional questions coming in. So I'm just going to wait just checking really quick. No, I don't see any more. All right. Well, this has been a great discussion. Unfortunately, I guess we're out of questions and we're out of time for today. So please join me in thanking Claire Rutkowski, Danielle Manning, and Phil Bates for their presentations, as well as today's sponsor, Bentley Systems. If you have any additional questions or comments, please don't hesitate to click the Email Us button on your console, and we will share them with our presenters so they can respond to you directly. If you didn't have a chance to fill it out earlier, you will be redirected shortly to the post-event survey. We look forward to hearing how to make our program work better for you. Please visit enr.com/webinars for the archive of this presentation to share with your colleagues, as well as information about our upcoming events. Make sure to tune back in for tomorrow's webinar, How GCs and Subcontractors Can Succeed by Sharing Risk More Fairly, airing at 2 p.m. Eastern. Thanks again for trusting us with your time, and have a great day.